Hello there and welcome to Pale Cachexia. Did I say it correctly? I have no clue. Anyway, let's continue with this lovely story because it's I wouldn't say it's getting good, but it's constantly good. It's really good. Why is this game so good, guys? How did you manage that? Anyway, links to the game in the description as per usual to the Steam store page if you want to travel over there. The fire danced in front of her like always, casting a warm flickering light across the floor. Esther sipped her tea, gazing at the flames contemplatively. How long had she been here now, exactly? It felt like years, somehow. Perhaps it was because Seina had welcomed her so warmly, without any judgment or expectations. Seina understood her better than anyone else, even if they'd known each other only a short time. And she never needed anything from Esther, only her company and support. Seina. Where was she? She'd gone upstairs a little while ago to fetch something, but it seemed strange that she was taking this long. Lost in her own thoughts, Esther hadn't noticed how much time had passed. Fidgeting her seat, she shot a glance towards the stairwell. It was foolish to get so worried like this. Seina had just gotten distracted by something upstairs. But it couldn't hurt to go check on her, could it? Once she'd made sure that Seina was perfectly fine, Esther could slink back down to wait again. That was all she needed to do. I mean, you could ask louder? Managing to convince herself it was the right decision, Esther crept upstairs. A strange feeling of guilt came over her, as if she were doing something terrible by adopting her friend, even though it didn't make any rational sense. Just go by the stairs and say something. If you have the doubts and such. But that guilt, or the guilt, only grew more intense as she approached Seina's bedroom, drawn to the flicker of light from beneath the door.
I really can't stand this anymore. I wish you were here, Papa. You could handle things a lot better than I can.
Sitting on the edge of the bed, Seina heaved a huge sigh, her gaze wistfully trained up towards the ceiling. Confused, Esther stepped closer, peering through the cracked door at her.
She's just so difficult all the time. She doesn't know how to cook or clean, and I'm running out of store food with all these meals for two. And she never speaks. How can I be with someone who's so boring?
Wow! She froze. Seina frustrated, distraught words echoed whole in her ears, sinking into her chest like a knife.
I really wish she would leave. I'd just save you, Papa. I was so much happier the way things were before. Now, what should I do? I didn't even want to go backstairs to her.
She sighed again, kicking her feet lightly in the air, before leaning back on the bed with a soft groan. Esther stared at her for a moment longer, completely stunned. I would just leave, to be fair, at that moment. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, and yet... In a way, she had always wondered if Seina's true feelings were like this. It wasn't like she could blame her. She'd never deserved Seina's kindness and hospitality to begin with. And if Seina would be happier without her, it would be best to just get out of the way. She barely felt the chilling night air as it enveloped her body. Instead, a numbness spread to her, dulling even the sensation of the ground beneath her feet. It took a moment to even realize that she'd started moving her legs, carrying her somewhere of their own accord. It didn't really matter, as long as she was leaving that place, forever. A place she never should have entered to begin with. Aimless and without any focused thought, Esther wandered across the dark clearing. Let me guess, she will end up in front of the mausoleum. Maybe she'll finally remember that she found the key of sorts. On the surface, she seemed to be in a hypnotic trance. But the truth was slightly different. Letting go of any responsibility, any sense of self-preservation or fear, she allowed her body to stumble wherever it wished. She was revered with a pleasant, waveless feeling, freed from all her thoughts and anxiety. A ghostly trance, devoid of any purpose, only following the invisible current that carried her along. In that moment, Esther realized that she had become truly, completely, hopelessly powerless. And she welcomed the relief of her burden with a grateful sigh. Shame. After several minutes or hours, perhaps, a small sea of grey headstones greeted Esther from the dark. As she drifted past them, she felt none of the uneasiness that had gripped her before. Instead, it almost seemed like she was returning home, to somewhere she belonged, back into the embrace of familiar friends. They beckoned her forward, drawing her in closer and closer, leading her towards the soul structure that rose among the trees. And then, two stone doors were gazing back at her. At first, a dark confusion gripped Esther. Why? What was she doing here? Hadn't there been something dangerous about this place? But as those thoughts welled in her mind, suddenly a beautiful longing warmth reached out for her. Something that wanted her, wanted to protect her, arms that she could fall back into. All she had to do was follow them. The doors drifted open for her, revealing a dark passage into the mausoleum. And yet, with that golden light still calling out so sweetly, her first tingle of fear quickly dissipated into nothingness. Once she was inside, Esther heard the doors gently close behind her again. But instead of unnerving her, the thought only brought her more comfort. Now there would be no temptation to return, no going back to such a wrong place. She followed the angelic summons deeper, heading down through the maze of peacefully sleeping bodies. The further she went, the more a sense of impending relief swelled her before her, promising deliverance from the pain she had even recognized before. She was so helpless now, and only complete surrender could wash all of her suffering away. So close. So close to releasing her grasp on everything. So close to the golden light that awaited her, right around the corner. Waiting to relieve her of that last bitter hope that anchored her in grief. She would be free. She would be free.
Esther! Esther, please wake up! Esther!
Wait, it was all a dream? What? Seriously? She jerked upright, drawing in a choked gasp. Sweat pooled in her shirt and dripped from her forehead onto her cheeks.
Esther!
To her surprise, Seina threw herself forward in a sudden hug, not seeming to mind that Esther was all but drenched. That was so naughty! It was all a dream? Damn! You tricked me there, guys. Those small arms clung tightly about her neck, and she could feel Seina giving her a reassuring squeeze. What happened?
You must have been having a horrible nightmare. I heard you crying out from upstairs, and I came down to see you shuddering here.
After she drew back, Seina gazed at Esther with obvious worry, biting her lower lip.
You threw off all the blankets, but you were soaked in sweat. I thought you had a fever.
As the shock of her dream faded, a sense of sheepishness overtook her relief from waking up.
I'm sorry I made you worry. It was only a dream. I'm not sick.
For whatever reason, she found herself hesitating as she reassured Seina. The medicine. Since she'd started taking it, her sleep was rarely peaceful, although she had never woken in such a state before.
Esther, do you want to sleep upstairs with me?
Huh? What?
The bed is really big, so there is plenty of room, but you might feel less scared if you had someone else nearby. Maybe you're afraid when you fall asleep, all alone in the dark room.
A deep concern shone in Seina's eyes, but something else seemed present in her anxious words. Something that almost sounded like guilt. For Esther had no idea why she should possibly feel guilty.
Only if having me around wouldn't bother you. I think I probably tossed and turned my sleep all the time. Oh, my poor Esther, you have a lot of nightmares.
Esther slowly nodded.
Well, you don't need to worry about me. I'm a really heavy sleeper. I only heard it because I woke up to drink some water.
I know it was a nightmare of hers, but god damn it. What if the nightmare actually has the real truth to it now? I don't know what to think now.
Come, let's go upstairs. I'll get you another of Papa's shirts. You shouldn't stay in that one, it's so damp.
And I bet Esther also feels like that right now. Taking Esther's hand, Seina led her out of the living room, starting up her usual stream of airy chatter. In the wake of her unnerving dream, it was soothing to hear Seina's bubbling words. They helped to block out the lingering echo of that cold, harsh rejection still resonating in Esther's mind, even if they couldn't completely erase it. After he reached the bedroom, Seina gave her another of Isaiah's black shirts and left to go fold the sofa's blankets while Esther changed. A few minutes later, the two girls were sleepily crawled in the soft bed, eager to escape from the cold night air. Unlike the sofa, there was plenty of room to be had, and Esther gratefully stretched out beneath her sheets.
Good night, Esther. I have another bad dream. I'll be here. Just wake me up, alright?
Alright. Sleep well, Seina.
You too.
With that, they both fell silent. Seina shifted a few times, then let out a contented exhale before growing still. It wasn't long before Esther heard her breathing settle into a slow, steady rhythm, sign that she'd already fallen asleep. Rolling over onto her back, Esther exhaled a grim, quiet sigh. Certainly this bed was far cozier than the couch, thanks to both the comfortable mattress and Seina's reassuring presence nearby. But despite Esther's deep tiredness, her mind refused to let her sleep again so easily. She lay awake in silence, staring into space with her eyes half open, repeating the vivid events of her dream. Seina. The more her words haunted Esther. As foolish as it was, she couldn't help but wonder if her nightmare mirrored reality. Perhaps there was some semblance of truth, even if the real Seina would never be so blunt about her feelings. She might resent Esther, but not admit it to herself consciously. Maybe she secretly hoped Esther would leave, and was just too embarrassed to tell her directly. Because of how kind Seina was, it was impossible to know if she was just masking her unhappiness for Esther's sake. What confused her most for was the mausoleum. Why had she been drawn to it like that? In the real world, the place unnerved her, and she didn't even want to get close to it. But in the dream it had called out to her so beautifully, promising freedom from a pain she didn't even realize she had. Something else puzzled her too. Seina said she'd cried out in her sleep, but Esther couldn't remember any sharp fear in the dream. There had been nothing that frightened or attacked her, which made it odd that she'd awoke in a cold sweat. If anything, the last part of her dream was almost pleasant. Perhaps she really had suffered a brief fever, an unknown side effect of the medicine. Or else her subconscious was hiding something from her waking self. I think I double clicked. Oh, wait, it went back? Interesting. As she emerged from her brooding thoughts, Esther suddenly noticed a wave on her arm. Startled, she glanced downward, her eyes swiftly widening at what she saw. Those nightmares, I think, might not be actually the reflection of reality. Hopefully, I hope they are not. Seina had curled up against her, clutching Esther like an oversized stuffed animal. She seemed fast asleep. Her movements must have been unconscious. A warm sensation bloomed in her chest. Seina looked so small, innocent, so calm compared to her normal self. As strong as she was, she seemed as defenseless as a small kitten in the arms of sleep. She trusted Esther enough to let all of her guard fall to the wayside, utterly at peace, while next to her friend. Sorry. It stirred in Esther a longing to protect a small girl, no matter the cost. Closing her eyes, she felt her body finally begin to relax, lulled back to the sleep by Seina's comforting presence. Her arm was bent at a slightly uncomfortable angle, but she didn't dare to move, not while Seina was sleeping so soundly. Soon she hardly noticed it at all, her thoughts fading away into pleasant nothingness. Until then, untroubled sleep finally drifted over her.
As much as I love it, I wish the sun wasn't so bright today.
When she heard Seina murmuring softly to herself, Esther turned to face the other girl. They were out gathering flowers on a warm afternoon, with most of the chores already behind them. Since that morning thaw, Seina had been acting a little less energetic than usual. Huh.
Are you alright, Seina? You're not ill, are you? Ill? Oh, no, I'm not ill. It's only just a headache. I get them sometimes, but I don't know why.
Seina glanced downward as she mumbled her reply, as if confessing her pain made her feel embarrassed.
You should go lay down then.
I can take care of the cemetery.
No, I really don't need to. I can keep working. You shouldn't have to do it alone.
It's fine, Seina. There is not much left. Rest, and the headache will go away sooner. She groaned softly in protest, pursing her lips together for a moment.
Alright, I will. But not because you're so stubborn about it, Esther. I'll see you inside soon, alright? Please don't work too hard.
That's slightly hypocritical advice coming from you, isn't it?
Esther, did I punch you in your sleep or something? You're ruthless today.
I have to be ruthless to make you take care of yourself.
Well, that's not something I ever expected to hear.
Pursing her lips in a pout, Seina prodded her finger playfully against Esther's side, and the two of them broke into light giggling. When the other girl turned and left for the Manor, Esther felt relieved in a way. Recently, Seina had been looking after her so much it almost made her uncomfortable. She jumped at any opportunity she had to even slightly repay the favor, for it never seemed like enough. Anything to keep the dream from becoming reality, she thought grimly. I so understand you right now with that. Clutching a basket of flowers in one hand and her broom in the other, Esther made her way along the path Seina had shown her. Despite her poor sleep, she felt curiously energized today. Spinning was less challenging, and her body responded to her wishes more willingly than normal, like a wave was temporarily lifted from her shoulders. She truly come to enjoy working outside, especially on days like this. Days when the forest felt like it accepted her, somehow. But despite her newfound comfort, there was still one place that sent an uncontrollable shiver down her spine as soon as she entered it. The cemetery. No matter how many times she visited this place with Seina, she could never shake the odd unsettling sensation it gave her. It was all in her head, most likely. After all, Seina didn't seem to feel the same atmosphere if her easy smiles were anything to go by. But even more strangely, Esther felt an indescribable pull towards this place. Almost as if something was waiting for her. Something she didn't know. Something she didn't want to know, but was being slowly led to uncover. A secret deeply buried. One that was truly better off that way. As she finished tending to the last of the graves, Esther's gaze finally drifted towards the single lonesome spot she had avoided. The grim shape of the mausoleum, its door tightly shut like a stone maw. There was no reason to bother with it. It's locked, Seina had said. I don't think I'll ever find the key. Oh boy. I think she would realize it right now. Despite her attempts at rationalizing with herself, a powerful urge swept over Esther. She cautiously approached the stone structure, half expecting a repeat of her dream somehow. Unlike before, for the door seemed tightly shut. And when she tugged at one of the handles to no avail, it confirmed her suspicions. In between the ornate slabs of stone, Esther noticed a small, almost imperceptible slot. The keyhole, no doubt. And the key of matching size would be incredibly difficult to find if it truly was lost somewhere. Oh boy, she realized. Right as that thought crossed her mind, Esther froze. Impossible. There was simply no chance. The likelihood of such coincidence was practically zero. Even though she fully understood it, she still couldn't control the sudden intense desire to try. Wait, you have it on you? Slowly, hesitantly, her hands drifted downward, feeling for her skirt pocket. There are pockets in skirts? What? Sure enough, a small bump still rested there. The key would fit perfectly. She knew before she even tried it, she could feel a pull between them somehow. And sure enough, as soon as she slid it into the lock, the door echoed with a low, ominous click. As she'd been burned, Esther jerked her hand back. It took her a moment to realize that she was trembling uncontrollably. Strangely enough, she didn't understand why. Should have thrown that key into the river or something. It was like an irresistible lure, pulled her towards the mausoleum, and at the same time every fiber of her body screamed at her to run away. For now, the latter instinct won out. Hastily locking the doors again, she pushed the key back into her skirt. She could investigate the interior some other time, and preferably while not alone. Yeah, just tell Seina that you found some key, right? But deep down Esther had an overpowering feeling that sooner or later something would bring her back here. I wonder if he might actually be in that mausoleum himself. Maybe that's how it ended, right? He was there. Seina knew about it and I don't know, just dropped the key somewhere, right? So she's not able to find. I don't know anymore. Leaving the cemetery behind, she finished up the remaining chores in a distant murky haze of thought. Her dream, the mausoleum, the key. The key in particular disturbed her greatly. It almost certainly belonged to Isaiah, which meant it had likely fallen out of his pocket in the woods. Or maybe that. But why? Why would he be carrying something so specific with him, especially such a distance away from the manor? Had he been out on a walk or was he running away? Everything about it seemed so strange, including the remarkable coincidence that she'd stumbled upon such a tiny thing. It was almost as if she had been meant to find the key, or as if it wanted to be found. Esther returned to the manor as the afternoon began steadily waning into evening. An unsettling discovery made her want to head straight for the study, in the hope that she could find something about the mausoleum in Isaiah's writings. But as she started to pass by the slightly open bedroom door, a strange hesitation suddenly forced her to stop. Her dream. Those words of loathing that Seina spoke. The idea of hearing them again made Esther uncontrollably shudder. It took all of her willpower to force her to close the door, to lean forward and peek inside. Seina's small form was curled up peacefully atop the bedsheets, fast asleep, as you can see. Had to. She looked as innocent as any human could possibly, her gentle expression completely different from that cold look Esther had witnessed in her nightmare. Of course she did. It was only a dream. Just a lingering dream. Sighing quietly, Esther pulled back from the door. She'd never been so paranoid about something before. It wasn't a welcome change, that much she could say for certain. Inside the study, the sun's warm rays leaked in sleepily through the window, though they were already beginning to recede. It was still bright enough to read without a candle, so Esther hurried over to an untouched shelf, beginning to quickly leaf through the various loose papers. She scanned each page for a mention of the mausoleum before setting it aside, trying to keep herself more focused on her topic of interest. However, almost everything she saw was related to the study of magic. Charms, hexes, talismans, many other clearly non-scientific things. Before long, the sun had... I mean, to be honest, if there is so much stuff about magic and such, of course the cemetery and mausoleum gives you the creeps. God damn it. Before long, the sun had fully receded into the darkness, and she had little choice but to light the candles in order to keep reading. Then, as her eyes flicked across another unrelated journal entry, something about it caught her attention. It was unmistakably Isaiah's handwriting, but it seemed even shakier and more chaotic than before. As usual, she couldn't contain her curiosity. Raising up to the light, she peered at the erratic words, trying to parse his unstable penmanship. You know what would be nice? If actually in some way on those papers, when it appears basically, you would see that really, you know, that writing is a bit shaky or something. That would be so nice. Anyway, once corrupted by the evils of society, there is no redemption for a faltering spirit. Simple pleasures turn to bitter cynicism. Childlike wonder shifts into suspicion, and a love for life becomes a need for relief, an outlet to escape the dread of facing another day. But in my daughter's unending joy, I have rediscovered a meaning for my own existence, a redemption from all of those poisonous thoughts and feelings. Nice. My sole wish is that her smile never darkens, and remains forever unbroken by worldly sorrows and disillusionment. She will be fully independent, completely removed from the mundane evils of society. No one shall find her here, and she shall not go to them.
Well, about that, mate. Bad news.
She was found out by someone. Alas, I know that it is only a matter of time before someone ventures in these woods, despite her ill reputation. For that reason, I have redoubled my efforts to protect this place, as I know my days are swiftly running out. Through my recent research of the arcane has yielded little, I have stumbled upon an ancient form of wording that should serve me well. In order for a living human to find the house, they must either share my blood, or be carrying one of my possessions. The second part checks out. I mean, she doesn't share your blood, but she shares the same illness, so maybe that also works out somehow. Any common thing will do, as long as it's attached to a memory of mine. If I had remained in contact with Jeremiah and ever asked him to visit, I would have all needed to send him a letter with a trinket attached. But now, any passerby will subconsciously keep their distance from the world's border, so subtly that they surely will never notice it, even if they are actively seeking the manor. In this way I will keep the two of us safe in our isolation. Even when I'm gone, there is no risk of Seina ever being found and lured away by an intruder. This security brings me some comfort in my last remaining days of lucid thought. I love her so very, very dearly. My Seina. I am distinctly painfully aware that I do not deserve her. I have become little more than a bitter shell, something that once harbored a relentless investment in the world around him, but no longer. No matter how much I attempt to change my ways, I feel as I am made of stone, unable to alter or improve myself without crumbling into useless pieces. That's why I would do anything, everything, to keep her from becoming what I am. If she never tastes the scorn of life beyond nature's boundaries, then she will be spared from the spiritual death it harbors. She will always retain her innocence, her childlike love for all she sees, and no one may ever shatter the fragile beauty her world yet retains. If she comes to despise me for keeping her here, then so be it. It pains me to know she does not see the truth behind my wordings, but one day I hope she will come to understand how I only acted out of love, selfish though it may be. Oh, so I guess he might have gotten out of the mansion itself, while his mind was not so clear anymore, right? And while he was going, he might have dropped the key somewhere. Not really planned, but you know, it happened. And then he wandered somewhere off, I guess. Her gaze finally lifted from the rambling words. It took her a moment to fully process what she'd read, connecting to the very same coincidence she'd been dwelling on earlier. The key. Murmuring aloud in astonishment, she unconsciously reached down for the small lamp in her pocket. Did his warding charm actually work? Was that why, despite the rumors of someone living in the forest, nobody had ever discovered the Manor before? And if she had never stumbled upon Isaiah's key, would she have passed right by this place, avoiding it without ever noticing? Again, I mean, might be because you shared the same illness, right? That you would still find it. But Isaiah had never wanted anyone else to come here. If he'd known Esther was living... Sorry. You know, sometimes having a strong sense of smell is so helpful. Very helpful. Because, the soup ready, so I will see you in a second. And here we are, 1 second later. Where did we... Okay, Isaiah had never wanted anyone else to come here. That's true. If he'd known Esther was living with his daughter, he would have been furious at both of them. Would he, Fa? A sharp pang of guilt cut through her, despite the fact that she didn't agree with his outlook. Surely it wasn't fair for him to keep Seina isolated, and yet... The idea of shattering Isaiah's dying wishes filled her with a deep sadness. In a way, she always felt like she knew him. Through all his intimate writings and Seina's description, she'd come to understand at least a part of him, enough to feel his bitterness and sorrow. Also, you know what? I have one more idea of what might be... No, it wouldn't work, actually, that connection I thought about. Anyway, you know, why she was able to enter the place. It wouldn't work. To think that he would have hated Esther if he saw her now, taking over his place at the Manor, sharing her life and experiences with Seina. He would have sought to tear them apart. At that moment, a horrible dizziness crashed into Esther, sending the world to a blurry spiral. She could hear her ears ringing. For a moment, it felt like she was about to lose consciousness completely. Stumbling out in the hallway, she made her way unsteadily towards the bedroom, leaning against the wall for support. Seina was gone. Huh? It didn't surprise her, but seeing an empty room made a strange panic flutter in her chest. Part of her wanted to call out, but she was fine. This had to be only a short, dizzy spell. What was it for? It wasn't time to take her medicine yet. Still too early. And yet she felt so weak, as if either she or the world would come crumbling down at any moment. She lay down for a few minutes, maybe the awful sensation would leave her. She just wanted to leave. Sorry. Esther. Esther! Huh? Seina's voice suddenly permitted the ringing in her ears. Turning round, saw the small girl watching her without obvious worry and confusion in her eyes. Did I say without? What the hell is wrong with me?
Esther! Are you right? Do you have a fever?
She quickly reached up to put her palm on Esther's forehead, trying to feel her temperature. No, I'm fine. Just a little dizzy. Oddly enough, right as she spoke those words, the sensation abruptly vanished. She still felt slightly off balance, but the ringing had stopped completely.
Dizzy! Oh dear! You haven't eaten since this morning, have you? I wonder if that's it. You don't eat nearly enough, Esther.
Sighing affectionately, Seina reached out with her hand, pulling her gently back towards the hallway.
Why don't we get to start the dinner? A meal and some hot tea would make you feel better, I'm sure of it.
Alright. I'm sorry for making you worry.
Why would be sorry? It's not like it's your fault. It's hard looking after oneself. Believe me, I should know. That's why it's so nice to have someone else around.
As happy state it made Esther to hear Seina's reaffirmation. A flicker of guilt bit into her stomach again. It refused to fade so easily this time, following her as they descended the stairs to the kitchen. Even though they sat down for their meal, she felt distracted, unable to enjoy their relaxing time together as much as usual. After a while, Seina's presence helped diminish the unpleasant thoughts that haunted Esther. She felt a little more reassured when her friend fussed over her, if only because it was a reminder that Seina truly cared. Making the other girl laugh and smile eased her worries too, especially since it seemed like the opposite of what Isaiah had feared would happen. But as they returned to the parlor, warming themselves by the fire like always, a nagging thought found its way to the forefront of Esther's mind. She had to tell Seina about the mausoleum. It didn't feel right to keep the key a secret. Besides, maybe Seina knew something else useful about it, like a clue as to why Isaiah had been carrying the key with him. Because he didn't want her to go there or something? I don't know. Could I ask you something, Seina?
Of course, you don't need to ask if you ask.
Seina giggled lightly. When she saw Esther's solemn expression, however, the smile soon faded from her features.
About the mausoleum. Have you ever been inside of it? The mausoleum... No, I haven't.
She shook her head somberly, looking slightly unnerved.
I think I did before, but I don't have the key. Well, about that, I found it. I have the mausoleum key.
Gasping audibly, Seina stared her in shock.
You found it? Huh? Where? I've searched all over the Manor and all through the grounds, even in the woods outside. Did Papa hide it somewhere?
Pulling out the key to offer to Seina, she started to explain what had happened. How she'd found that far away in the woods, her son realized it was for the mausoleum, and her discovery of Isaiah's protective ward around the manor. She was too embarrassed to mention her dream, which in truth was the only reason why she tried the key in the first place. Otherwise, it likely would have slipped her mind completely. Once Esther had finished speaking, Seina sat in thoughtful silence for a moment. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out to take the tiny key, curling her fingers around it so lightly that she seemed to be afraid it would burn her.
I'd forgotten about it until now, but remember Papa mentioning something about the ward. That wasn't long before.
She trailed off, holding the key tightly against her chest. Esther put a gentle hand on her shoulder. In response, Seina smiled at her gratefully, still visibly shaken, but she seemed to recover herself quickly.
Papa did warn me to never go into the mausoleum, especially not with him. He probably carried the key around so I couldn't find it.
Huh?
But he always refused to tell me why I couldn't go inside. It was so frustrating.
We should not go there. Something is hidden there. Again, her mind unwillingly flashed back to her dream. A sense of foreboding crawled over her, but she did her best to force it away and ignore it.
Maybe we could take a look there together sometime. If it seems safe, I mean. I don't want to go too deep inside if it's falling apart, of course.
I'd like to see it. I don't know why, but it feels important somehow.
Well, then maybe it is important. It's worth believing your instincts. They know a lot more than we do, I think.
Her smile slowly began to brighten again, and she reached up to poke the tip of Esther's nose teasingly.
Tick.
Ow.
Ah, what do you mean, how? I barely even touched your nose.
You don't know your own strength. My whole face went numb.
Esther.
Unable to contain herself at Seina's pouting, Esther broke into stifled laughter. Seina jetted in, and before long they fell into a comfortable, easy chatter while curling up on the couch. At her friend's behest, Esther heard some stories about her time at the academy, and of the days back before she contracted the Pale. For her thoughts still occasionally drifted back to Mausoleum, sharing her finding Seina had lifted a huge burden from her shoulders in much needed relief. Seina's interest in everything she said helped distract her too. She'd never met anyone who held such interest in what she had to say. It fascinated her It fascinated her how the most mundane things, laws, customs, crimes, politics, enraptured the other girls so much. The only views she'd acquired of the world had come from Isaiah and the various books of fiction and non-fiction he'd given her to read. It was a very limited, carefully curated selection of knowledge, focused mostly on the natural world, and even her fictional stories were so fantastical that they barely touched on the aspect of modern society. Esther found it interesting too, how explaining her own culture aloud made it sound so odd and contrived. There were countless vestigial laws and customs that had no place anymore, and yet most people still treated them as indispensable. In a way, Esther could understand Isaac's scorn for civilized society. Falling into patterns of traditional thought, never questioning them, leading one into a cycle of misery without ever fully understanding it. It really was frustrating. And Seina, spared as she was from such a thought, seemed so blissfully beyond all of it. Perhaps that explained why Esther's guilt refused to be rationalized away. Like Isaiah, she only wanted what was best for her friend. The idea that she was somehow contaminating Seina's mind with outside influences made her feel deeply uncertain, even if the other girls seemed so eager to learn about the world outside her own. Move to bedroom. Finally, as the fire began to die down, the pair returned upstairs to their room. As Seina put on the nightgown, Esther quickly injected herself with her nightly medicine, gritting her teeth to finish it as quickly as possible. Luckily, it seemed easier than normally, maybe because another presence was nearby. After both of them had changed to their more comfortable nightwear, they crawled under covers before the chill could seep into their bones. This time Seina was still awake when she snuggled up to Esther, draping an arm across her waist.
Oh, so sleepy. Good night, Esther.
Sleep well, Seina. A peaceful warm silence draped over them after they exchanged words, replaced by the color rhythm of their breathing. Before long, Esther found her coarseness easily ebbing away. It was the gentlest sleep she had ever fallen into. In her last moments of coherent thought, she found herself deeply, contently grateful for it. And then, lulled off by the warmth of Seina's arms and the coziness of her soft pillow, she sank to the comfortable darkness. A small white shape lay fallen among the leaves. As he bent down to pick it up, Isaiah felt a strange sharp pang in his chest, and his throat tightened uncomfortably. She hadn't dropped it. She'd thrown it carefully to the ground, turning away as she couldn't bear the sight of it. "You're so unfair. Why can't I go there? Why can't I have a friend? You don't love me at all. You only care about yourself." Foolish girl. Shouting him so rashly, then running off in the middle of the night. What was she thinking? If she wasn't careful, she could get hurt. She might trip and fall, or run into a wild animal, or get lost out in the woods. He thought he'd raise her to be the smarter than that. Oh, did that happen? Interesting. Holding the white cat under one arm, Isaiah began to swiftly stride after her, his jaw tightly clenched. She turned off in the direction of the graveyard, little wonder, considering how it seemed to be her favorite place. What? But he'd always disliked it. No matter how many times he visited the cemetery, he could never shake the pleasant feeling of being watched by someone.
Seina! Stop this ridiculous behavior. Don't act like a spoiled, petulant child.
Although he called out to the darkness in a loud, stern tone, his voice briefly cracked. This was a waste of time for both of them. And if she scraped her knee or twisted an ankle, running blindly through the trees, it would be even more of an inconvenience, wouldn't it? She'd never acted so impulsively before. Perhaps she inherited her mother's carelessness, after all, and was finally beginning to rear its ugly head in her behavior. To roar. As he entered the cemetery grounds, his gaze quickly scanned across the sea of graves. There was no sign of Seina, but in the distance he glimpsed something that made his blood run cold.
The mausoleum doors. They were open. Had she fled inside there?
Oh boy. His strong claustrophobia had kept him from ever venturing into that place. But from old writings on the Manor grounds, he knew that it was a deep labyrinth, set of catacombs untouched for many, many years. Right ground in its depths without a light was beyond foolish. What on earth had gotten into that girl?
For hell's sake, damn it all, everything!
Although his first instinct was to charge in after her before she could get too far, he forced himself to stop. If he went in blind, then they would both end up lost. He had to go back and fetch a lamp first. He had to follow his mind before his instincts. After a long moment of hesitation, he turned sharply on his heel and dashed towards the Manor. Once he grabbed the first lamp he found inside, Isaac ran back to the graveyard as fast as he could, panic adrenaline flooding through his veins. In one hand he still clutched a small stuffed toy, squeezing it so tightly that his sharp knuckles seemed on the verge of rupturing through his skin. Seina. He couldn't let any harm come to her. Foolish, foolish girl. He taught her not to act rashly, warned her over and over again. Of course she didn't listen to him. She was her mother's daughter, an uncontrollable flame, intent on burning itself out. Why wouldn't she just listen to him, realize he was protecting her, giving everything just to keep her safe? The ungrateful little... Clenching his teeth, he forced himself through the mausoleum doors. His footsteps echoed off the walls, a sharp but hollow sound and loud. Far, far too loud. The lamp in his hand only illuminated a few feet in front of him, the remaining darkness blocking him in tightly on every side. Down the cracked stairs, dust clogging his lungs, his heart racing at a sickening speed. His mind, struck by the image of Seina's terrified face, fell alone in the dark, wherever she was now. Soon he emerged into the decrepit corridor. There was still no sign of Seina. Only the long, ominous shapes of caskets buried in the walls and standing along the hallway like silent sentinels resting in the dark. For the ceilings were higher than he expected, he still felt his chest suddenly tighten, forcing his breaths to grow shallow. Seina! Her name emerged from Isaac's lips as little more than a weak, fearful whisper. As the sound of his own voice sank into his head, a bitter bile swiftly rose to the back of his throat. What a pathetic coward he was, unable to call out for his own daughter, petrified by his baseless phobia. Seina! Can you hear me? When he forced himself to shout, however, instead of carrying any further, his voice seemed to die out within a moment. It was as if something had smothered it, sunk beyond the underground walls that surrounded him. Even if he were to scream, the sound would surely be suffocated before it could echo any further. The unnatural acoustics were only a product of his fear. More importantly, if Seina was here, he had to find her. Quickly, now, before she wandered any deeper into the labyrinth. This game is so good actually at building up atmosphere. With the lamp in one outstretched hand and Seina's stuffed animal tucked beneath his arm, Isaiah began to wind his way through the corridors. In one of his pockets, he had the withered remnants of several flowers Seina had given him not long ago. Silly as it was, he preferred to keep them on his person instead of putting them in a vase. Now, however, it was necessary to use them for another purpose. Whenever he was about to round another corner, he dropped a small color petal at the edge. That's wise. It would be enough to help him find his way back, most likely. Oh shit, that's creepy. Seina! I'm not cross with you, come on, and we'll act as if none of this ever happened. As he called out for her again, forcing himself to sound calm and dryly patient, his eyes fell on the statue across the hall. He had already passed an unsettling amount of them, but their tall, shrouded figures never ceased to disturb him. Understandable. I'll make a pot of your fire with tea, and we'll read together by the fire. That's your fair way to spend a cold night, right? Far better than huddling in the dark in the cold. The smile that quickly threaded across his lips felt wrong, like a coffin opened from the inside. Something that never should have happened. Something that could have been avoided. No. He hadn't done anything wrong. Creepy. Seina! Please! Another corner. Another long empty corridor that stretched out before him, same as all the others. Was she even here? Should he turn back? But what if he left, not knowing she was just around the next corner? No. The door was open. She had to be in here. He knew she was. He knew it. Don't treat your father like this! If you want me to apologize, I will, I promise, but don't run away from me! The strength, his voice slowly crumbled, returning to the same trembling whisper as before. Bitter and self-pitying, yet still pleading, clinging to the arrogant faith that he deserved to get his daughter back. But he did, didn't he? And he done everything for her, given her everything. How could she just disappear? Leave him, her father, alone and lost, searching in vain, panicking and hopeless. Then he glimpsed it. A disturbance in the dust, the shadow of a footprint. His heart leapt. It had to be hers. Another and another leaned down the corridor, around another corner. He had to follow. He ran. The pound in his chest threatened to stop his heart altogether, so intense that he overwhelmed him with dizziness and fresh nausea. But if she was here, and she was here, he had to find her. They had to escape. But it wasn't safe. Something about it was so wrong. He could feel it, eating away at his head, into his head. Waiting, watching, staring, lurching, moving. Following, hunting, closing in, closer, closer, closer. Running his circles, following his own footsteps, faster, closer, finally. Found. There, around the next corner. They were there. Their faces. Oh, their faces. He knew it, he knew it, he knew it. He had to run. It wasn't her, it never was her, it was always them. Run, he had to run, run! But no matter how much he ran, they were always right there. And when he stared at them, their voices entered his head. Peel off your skin, what? Drill inside your skull. Drag out your intestines. A pure terrified hatred and rejection of everything, of himself. He couldn't leave. There was no exit. There were never any petals, never any footprints. Too late. They were crawling his ears, eating into his head, grinding it all up. Getting inside of him, putting him down into a casket, shutting the lid. Down, 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 down. Down. Rot. Decay. You ended it. Isaiah. What the matter? It was her dream or something? What the freak? Oh my god. Okay, we will find out if that was her dream in the next episode. I actually need to end it now. I'm sorry. I want to continue myself. This is so good. Why is it so good? Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Hope you have a wonderful day. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.